The stars above the capital world of the Chosen burned cold and bright, as if they were witnesses to secrets no one dared speak. The Chosen had ruled their empire for thousands of years, a people bred for elegance, strength, and destiny. They believed no species could rise against them. Their wisdom was unmatched, their armies endless, their technology carved from relics older than galaxies. To them, humanity was only a footnote, a soft and fragile race, quick to bleed and quick to die. But tonight the whispers spread through their marble halls like a growing storm. Something had gone wrong. The first clash began not on their homeworld, but on a frontier planet where the Chosen enforced their laws. There, a single human had stood against their enforcers. Witnesses said his face was calm, almost kind, the face of someone harmless. They mocked him, called him gentle, even fragile. But when they pressed harder, when their power crushed too close, he changed. His fury exploded, and entire squads of armored Chosen warriors fell as if the wind itself had torn them apart. The stories sounded impossible. The Chosen were not weak. They were not meant to lose. Yet the survivors returned broken and shaken, their voices trembling as they spoke of the human dot in the capital chamber. High Speaker Aravian addressed the council. His tall frame shimmered with blue armor that reflected the light of crystal lamps. They say this one is different. They say his fury broke even the will of the sacred guard. If true, then we are facing more than rebellion. We are facing a storm wrapped in human skin. The council laughed at first. Many brushed it aside. How could a single human defeat the warriors chosen by prophecy? Yet Aravian's voice did not waver. His eyes carried the memory of fear, though he hid it behind his words. On the frontier, the human named Kale moved through the ruins of the Chosen's garrison. His hands trembled not from weakness, but from the storm of anger that still burned. Inside, he had not wanted this war. He had come to the colony to protect those who had been trampled by the Empire's taxes and chains. He had spoken softly, begged for peace, tried to shield the weak with words, but the Chosen laughed at his pleas. They called him soft. They thought his kindness was proof of weakness. Until they hurt the children. That was when his restraint shattered. Kale had moved like lightning, his strikes cutting through armor as though it were paper. His face never lost its calm look, yet his fury was unstoppable. The Chosen had learned that beneath his gentle mask lay something they could not control, something they could not predict. Now, as Kale stood among the broken marble and burning banners, he felt the weight of what he had done. His heart told him he had only defended the innocent. But he also knew this was no longer a single act of defiance. The Chosen would not forgive. The Empire would not forget. Across the galaxy, rumors spread. Some humans whispered his name in awe, while others feared he had doomed them all. The Chosen's empire, vast and merciless, would unleash everything they had to crush the Sparky. Had lit. Kale sat on the edge of a ruined wall, staring into the smoke-filled night. The children he had protected were safe behind him, their small eyes watching with a mix of fear and wonder. They whispered to one another, calling him both angel and monster. He did not correct them, because perhaps he was both. In the capital, High Speaker Aravian summoned his generals. Do not be deceived by his face. They say it is gentle. They say he speaks softly. But when fury takes him, even devils would fear. Gather our fleets. Prepare our armies. This human must be crushed before others believe he is proof of humanity's strength. The war drums began to echo. Armies were readied. Fleets of shining starships awakened from their docks. The Empire would strike with the weight of worlds. But deep inside, the whispers of fear remained. The Chosen had always ruled by belief in their own destiny, but belief trembled now. Because of one human. Kale looked at the sky, knowing they were coming. He could feel the storm approaching, not of weather but of armies, fleets, and endless battles. He did not want to be a savior. He did not want to be a legend. Yet destiny had been forced upon him. They thought I was gentle, he murmured. Into the night, his hands tightened into fists. But they will learn what fury means. The children huddled close, feeling both safe and afraid. And in the distance, the stars began to flicker. As the first chosen warships entered orbit, the war had begun. Asterisk. The first wave of chosen soldiers descended from the skies like falling stars, their ships cutting through the clouds with silver trails of fire. Entire regiments marched in formation, their banners glowing with ancient runes. The people of the colony trembled as the ground shook beneath the weight of armored boots. To the chosen, this was not a war. It was a demonstration. They wanted to show humanity how foolish it was to resist. Cale stood alone at the edge of the settlement, his cloak torn, his hands empty. To the colonists watching from hiding places, he looked like nothing more than a weary man. His calm expression gave no hint of the storm he carried inside. The chosen commander, a towering figure clad in black steel, stepped forward with a sneer. "Human," the commander's voice echoed through the translation implants. "Lay down your pride. Lay down your fury. You are fragile flesh and we are destiny itself. Surrender, and your people will be spared." Cale's voice was quiet, almost too soft to hear. "You hurt the innocent. You burned homes. You chained children. And now you ask me to bow?" The commander raised his blade high, laughter in his tone. "You mistake mercy for weakness. You mistake our patience for fear. I will cut your heart out, and your people will learn obedience." The moment the blade swung, Cale moved dot to the soldiers watching. It was as if the air itself exploded. One heartbeat, the commander's blade was falling. The next heartbeat, the commander was on the ground, armor torn open, his weapon shattered into pieces. Cale's strike had been faster than eyes could follow. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of lightning in the air. The chosen soldiers froze. They had expected screams, surrender, or death. Instead, they saw something their empire had never shown them before: a human who refused to kneel. A human whose fury had broken their champion in a single strike. Cale stood straight, his face calm, almost sorrowful. "I warned you," he said, his voice steady. "Do not push me. Do not harm them, or I will answer." The soldiers tried to. "Rally," orders rang out. Energy rifles fired beams of blue light that could melt stone. Cale's body twisted and moved with impossible speed. Every strike of his fists and every step of his boots shattering armor and tearing through their formation. He was not wild, not uncontrolled. His movements were precise, as though every action was guided by something sharper than instinct. Within minutes, the first regiment was broken. The ground was littered with smoking armor and silent warriors. The survivors crawled back to their transports, their eyes wide with something the chosen had never felt before. Fear. From the safety of the colony's caves, the humans stared in disbelief. To them, Cale had always been quiet, someone who carried firewood, repaired walls, and smiled gently at children. He had never raised his hand unless forced to. But now, as they watched him walk through the battlefield with fire still burning in his eyes, they realized there was another side to him. He was gentle, yes, but only until the moment his people were threatened. Then his fury was something no empire could cage. In the capital, High Speaker Aravian received the reports. His generals bowed in shame, their voices stumbling as they described how a single human had torn apart one of their strongest battalions. The council chamber fell into silence. One elder finally spoke. "Perhaps this one is not ordinary. Perhaps humanity hides something we overlooked." Aravian's hand clenched into a fist. "No, this is not strength. This is chaos. Fury is not power. Fury is madness, and madness can be crushed." His voice thundered through the hall. "Prepare the fleets. If one human thinks he can stand against us, then let all humans suffer for his defiance." Armies were summoned from across the stars. Worlds loyal to the Chosen began to gather forces. The Empire would unleash a storm greater than any Kale had ever seen. But still, doubt whispered in their hearts. If one human could do this, what would happen if more of them rose? Back on the colony, Kale sat by the fire that night. His hands were stained, not with blood, but with the weight of choices. The children gathered close to him again, whispering stories of what they had seen. Some called him an angel. Others said he was more terrifying than the devils in the old tales. Kale stared into the flames. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. "This is only the beginning," he whispered to himself. "The Empire will not forgive me, and they will not forgive humanity. I must be ready." Above them, hidden in the stars, the fleets of the Chosen were already moving. The war was no longer rumor. It had become inevitable. The colony had a brief silence after the battle, a silence heavy with both relief and dread. For the first time, the settlers dared to believe they could resist the Chosen, but they also knew what was coming next. The Empire never forgave rebellion. The Empire always answered with fire. Kale walked the outer rim of the settlement as dawn broke across the sky. His footsteps were steady, his eyes sharp. The people watched him from a distance, whispering as though he were no longer one of them, but something more. To them, he was hope wrapped in human skin. To himself, he was simply a man who had been pushed too far. That morning, scouts rushed back with news. Chosen warships had entered orbit. Dozens, perhaps hundreds. Their metallic hulls blotted out. The stars. From the ships poured legions of soldiers, machines, and armored beasts bred for war. This was not a punishment squad. This was an invasion. The colonists gathered in the central hall, fear thick in the air. Voices rose, calling for surrender, pleading that one man's fury was not worth the destruction of them all. Others begged Kale to lead them, to fight again. The debate tore at the fragile unity of the settlement. Kale stood before them, his calm face betraying nothing of the storm inside him. "I did not choose this war," he said softly, "but it has come to us. If you kneel, they will still take what they want. If you resist, they will strike harder. But if we stand together, we can make them see humanity is not so easily broken." The room fell silent. Some nodded, some looked away, but all of them felt the weight of his words. Night, the sky lit up with fire. Chosen ships unleashed their bombardments, turning forests into oceans of flame. Their machines stormed the ground, engines roaring like thunder. Soldiers in gleaming armor marched in perfect formation, their weapons glowing with the energy of ancient relics. Kale moved through the battlefield like a shadow of fury. He struck not with wild rage, but with sharp, precise blows that shattered armor and toppled machines. His face remained calm, almost sorrowful, as if every strike was both a necessity and a burden. To the Chosen, this calmness was more terrifying than rage. They had faced enemies who screamed, who fought with desperation, who crumbled under pressure. But Kale fought with silence. His fury burned deep inside, but on his face there was no hatred, only resolve. That quietness unnerved them. It made him feel less like a man and more like a force they could not understand. The colonists, inspired by his stand, took up arms. Farmers turned their tools into weapons. Mechanics turned machines into makeshift defenses. They fought not because they believed they could win, but because they had seen one human stand against the Empire, and that gave them courage. High above, aboard the flagship, High Speaker Aravian watched the reports flood in. Each new image brought fury to his face. Entire units falling, machines torn apart, soldiers retreating. "This is not possible," he hissed. "No human should be able to do this." An old general spoke with hesitation. "Perhaps it is not about what he is, but what he awakens in others. The colonists rise because of him. His fury has given them strength." Aravian slammed his fist against the table. Then we will crush not only him but all who follow. Burn their homes, break their spirit. Let them see what happens when they defy the chosen. On the ground, Kale felt the shift in the enemy's tactics. Their strikes became more brutal, targeting the colonists directly. Villages burned, and screams filled the night. The chosen wanted to break morale, to show that one man's strength could not protect everyone. Kale's fury deepened. He moved faster, struck harder, yet the weight on his shoulders grew. For every enemy he felled, another rose. For every life he saved, another was lost. His heart ached, but his resolve did not waver. One evening, as smoke rose across the horizon, a child approached him. She had lost her parents in the fires, but her eyes held no tears. She looked at him as if he were the last pillar standing in a world collapsing. "You're not gentle, are you?" she asked in a trembling voice. Kale knelt, his calm gaze meeting hers. "I try to be, but when they hurt what I love, I cannot be." The child whispered, almost to herself, "Then you're scarier than the devils." Her words echoed in his mind as he rose and turned back to the battlefield. He had always wanted to be gentle, to live in peace. But peace was denied to him. If the Empire thought his fury was a curse, then he would make it their downfall. That night, under the glow of burning skies, Kale led a counterattack. His strikes carried not only his fury, but the will of every colonist who refused to kneel. For the first time, the chosen felt something they had never known in their long history of conquest. Doubt. The fires of war spread across the colony, painting the night skies red. Villages lay in ruins, and entire fields were scorched to ash. The chosen had unleashed their full fury, not just upon Kale, but upon the people he sought to protect. For them, this was no longer about discipline or order. It was about crushing hope before it could spread. Kale moved through the chaos with purpose, leading raids to strike down enemy positions. His presence was like a torch in the dark, steady and unyielding. Wherever he appeared, the colonists rallied, their courage swelling. Wherever he struck, the chosen faltered, their confidence breaking piece by piece. But Kale knew the truth. For every battle he won, the chosen sent more troops. For every strike that shattered their formations, the Empire summoned reinforcements from distant worlds. The war was no longer local, it was becoming something greater. Late one evening, Kale stood at the edge of the settlement, his eyes scanning the sky as ships burned like falling comets. A small group of colonists approached him, their faces lit with determination. "You are our leader now," one of them said firmly. "You've shown us that we don't have to bow." Kale shook his head. "I never wanted to lead. I only wanted to protect." "But that is what leaders do," another replied. "The chosen fear you. They call you the fury of humanity. And because of you, we no longer fear them." The words struck him deeply. He did not see himself as a savior, but the people had given him that mantle. And once a people believe, even empires tremble. The next day, the chosen unleashed something new. From their warships descended monstrous constructs, machines larger than houses, built from living metal and powered by cores of ancient energy. They had been forged for wars that ended centuries ago, weapons so devastating they had been locked away as relics. The chosen had freed them now, desperate to end Kale's defiance. The ground shook as the machines advanced. Energy cannons fired beams that carved through stone and steel alike. Even Kale felt the weight of their presence. For the first time, the colonists wavered. Against soldiers, they could fight. Against beasts, they could resist. But against machines, born of forgotten wars, their courage trembled. Kale stepped forward, his voice calm. "Stay behind me. These are not gods. They are only weapons." The first machine struck, a blast tearing through the earth where Kale had stood a moment before. But Kale moved faster than eyes could follow, his body a blur of fury. With his bare hands, he tore into the machine's armor, ripping wires and cores until it collapsed in a storm of sparks. The colonists gasped. The chosen soldiers faltered. Another machine advanced, then another, and Kale met them all. His strikes were precise, each movement a storm guided by something greater than strength. He fought not just with muscle, but with purpose, with fury. Born of every injustice the Chosen had inflicted by night's end. The machines lay in ruins, their burning hulks lighting the battlefield. The colonists cheered, but Kale did not. He looked at the wreckage and knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not stop. They would bring greater horrors until he was broken far away. In the Chosen capital, High Speaker Aravian watched the footage in silence. His generals argued among themselves, some calling for more troops, others urging restraint. Finally, Aravian rose, his voice cutting through the noise. "This human is no longer a rebel," he declared. "He is a symbol. His fury has become a weapon more dangerous than any fleet. If he lives, he will ignite others. If he dies, his death must break." Their hope forever, the council agreed. A new plan was set in motion. Not just soldiers, not just machines, but assassins, spies, and whispers of fear would be sent. They would not only fight Kale on the battlefield, they would break him from within. Back on the colony, Kale felt the shift. The attacks became more calculated, striking where people were most vulnerable. Supplies vanished. Trusted friends began to doubt each other. Fear crept in, colder than any fire. One night, as Kale stood watch, a shadow moved at the edge of the settlement. A figure cloaked in black emerged, their blade glowing with strange runes. Unlike the soldiers, this one did not march or shout. They moved with silence, their eyes fixed on Kale. The assassin struck swiftly, blades flashing with deadly precision. For the first time in the war, Kale faced an enemy who matched his speed, who anticipated his strikes. The fight was fierce, silent but filled with sparks and broken stone. At last, Kale caught the assassin's blade in his bare hand. The runes burned against his skin, but he did not let go. With a final surge of fury, he disarmed the figure and cast them to the ground. The assassin's mask fell away, revealing not a warrior, but a young chosen girl. Her eyes burned not with hatred, but with fear. She had been sent to kill him, but now she lay trembling at his feet. The colonists surrounded them, demanding her death. But Kale raised his hand. "No," he said firmly. "Killing her proves nothing. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is strength." The girl's wide eyes locked on him, stunned. She had been taught humans were weak, soft, too gentle to survive. But here was a man who had destroyed armies, yet still chose mercy. And for the first time in her life, she doubted everything she had been told. The battle with the assassin left the colony shaken. Many of the settlers had demanded the girl's death. They saw her as a weapon of the Empire, a dagger aimed at Kale's heart. But Kale's refusal to kill her sent ripples of confusion through both his people and the Chosen. The young chosen girl, barely older than the colonists' children, sat in silence within a guarded tent. Her name was Lyra, though she had not spoken it aloud. She was trained from birth to believe humans were fragile and cruel, unworthy of standing against destiny. Yet Kale had spared her, even after she tried to take his life. Mercy had not been part of her lessons. Some colonists called Kale a fool for keeping her alive. "She betray us," they warned. "She signal her masters." But others began to see something different. Perhaps this mercy was more dangerous than fury itself. Mercy could change minds. Mercy could plant doubt inside the Empire. Kale visited her often, bringing food, water, and silence. He did not question her, nor did he force her to speak. He only looked at her with the same calm gaze that unsettled both enemies and friends. Over time, Lyra began to speak in fragments. She told him of her training, of the whispers of prophecy that surrounded the Chosen, of how they believed their rule was written in the stars. She also admitted something quietly, that when she saw him fight, she felt fear not of his strength, but of the truth that the Chosen might be wrong. Meanwhile, the Empire did not rest. High Speaker Aravian watched the reports of Kale's mercy with disgust. He uses kindness as a weapon, Aravian said bitterly. This is worse than his fury. If he shows mercy to our own, he may steal their loyalty. That cannot be allowed. New orders were issued. The war shifted again. Instead of direct battles, the Chosen spread poison into the minds of the colonists. They sent messages promising safety in exchange for Kale's surrender. They offered wealth, freedom, even dominion over other humans. Fear and temptation took root. At night, Kale listened to the colonists argue. Some wanted to fight until the end. Others whispered that handing him over would end their suffering. Kale felt the weight of their stares, the quiet blame that grew heavier each day. One evening, a group of settlers confronted him directly. Their leader, a man who had lost his entire family in the bombings, stood trembling with anger. "This war is because of you," he said. "Before you fought, they only taxed us. Before you struck, they only punished us. Now because of you, they burn everything. How many more must die for your fury?" Kale did not answer at once. His silence stretched long enough for others to murmur agreement. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "If you kneel, they will take more than taxes. They will take your spirit. They will teach your children to bow until they forget they ever stood. Yes, my fury brought their wrath. But it also showed them that we are not as soft and sweet as they thought. We can endure, we can resist. That is the price of freedom." His words did not erase their anger, but it steadied the hearts of those who still believed. The colony held together, though cracks in its unity deepened. Lyra listened from the shadows. She had been raised to despise humans, but now she saw them fighting not for conquest, but for survival. She saw Kale carrying the blame for them all, never faltering. Something inside her began to shift. The next attack came swiftly. Chosen assassins, dozens this time, infiltrated the colony under cover of night. Their blades struck from rooftops and alleys. The colonists panicked, but Kale moved with his usual calm fury, intercepting the assassins before they could reach the children. The fight was brutal, silent except for the clash of steel and the crack of breaking stone. Lyra watched from her tent, her heart torn. At last she made her choice. She slipped past her guards and picked up a fallen weapon. When one assassin lunged at Kale's back, she struck instead. Saving him from the blade meant to pierce his heart. The colonists gasped. The girl who had once tried to kill Kale now fought at his side. She moved with skill, her strikes sharp and precise. For the first time, she defied her masters not out of training, but out of belief. When the last assassin fell, silence returned. The colonists stared at Lyra with suspicion and awe. She dropped the weapon and met Kale's gaze. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "They told me humans were weak. They told me mercy was foolish. But I see now they feared mercy more than anything." Kale nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then choose. Will you kneel to them, or will you stand with us?" Lyra's answer was clear in her eyes before her lips spoke the words. "I will stand." For the first time, the colony saw not just a human rising, but a chosen turning away from the Empire. It was small, fragile, but it was enough to ignite a dangerous thought. If one chosen could change, perhaps more could follow. High above in the Empire's halls, Aravian felt the tremor in his destiny. Fury could be crushed. But mercy, the kind that turned enemies into allies, that was something even the chosen had no weapon against. The war had dragged on for weeks. The colony stood scarred but unbroken, a stubborn thorn in the side of the chosen empire. For every battalion the chosen sent, Kale destroyed. For every machine unleashed, he tore it apart. Yet the Empire's power was vast, and even Kale's fury could not end the endless tide. But something else had begun to stir. Word of Kale's defiance spread beyond the colony. Stories carried across stars, whispered from one oppressed world to another. A human who fought the Chosen and lived. A human whose fury shook armies, yet whose mercy even turned enemies into allies. His name became a spark, and sparks can ignite fires. Lyra stood beside Kale now, her posture no longer that of an assassin, but of a warrior who had chosen her own path. She spoke to the colonists, teaching them secrets of the Empire's tactics, exposing the weaknesses hidden beneath the Chosen's pride. More importantly, she sent quiet messages into the Empire itself, reaching other young Chosen who had begun to doubt. At first, only whispers returned. But soon, defections began. Small groups of Chosen soldiers laid down their arms, choosing exile over blind obedience. It was unthinkable, a fracture in an empire that had believed itself eternal. High Speaker Aravian raged in his council chambers. He is no longer one man, he is an infection. His fury breeds rebellion, his mercy corrupts loyalty. If we do not end him now, the Chosen will fall from within. So they unleashed their final weapon, from the deepest vaults of their empire. They awoke the Judgment Engine, a colossal warship built not for conquest, but for annihilation. It was said to hold the fire of dead stars in its core, capable of burning entire worlds. Its purpose was not to fight armies, but to erase symbols. The ship arrived above the colony, its shadow swallowing the land. Colonists cried out, despair, gripping their hearts. They knew no weapon could resist such a thing. Even Kale, standing beneath its looming presence, felt the weight of inevitability. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. You can't fight that. No fury can shatter a star's fire. Kale's calm gaze turned to the sky. Then we don't fight it. We end it another way. That night, under cover of smoke and chaos, Kale gathered a small group: Lyra, a handful of colonists, and those willing to risk everything. Their goal was not to meet the Chosen's army head-on, but to strike at the heart of the Judgment Engine. They infiltrated the warship through hidden tunnels Lyra revealed, passages known only to Chosen bloodlines. Inside, the ship was a cathedral of machinery glowing with veins of molten light. Its core pulsed like a captive sun, threatening to consume everything. The mission was madness. Guards swarmed the halls, alarms blared, and battles erupted in every corridor. But Kale's fury cut a path, his strikes precise, his calm unshaken. He was no longer fighting for himself. He was fighting for every voice that had whispered his name across the stars. At last, they reached the core chamber. The fire of the dead star roared behind walls of shimmering energy. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. If we destroy it, the blast will consume us all. Kale placed a hand on the console, his eyes fixed on the light. Some battles are not about survival. They're about what survives after. But before he could act, Lyra stepped forward. No, let me. I was raised in their lies. My hands built their blades. If mercy means anything, let it mean that I choose my own end. Kale looked at her, the calm in his gaze breaking for the first time. He shook his head slowly. Mercy also means giving you a future. Live, Lyra. Show them that even the Chosen can change. He moved faster than she could stop, channeling his fury into the console. The system screamed as the energy bent too. His will. The Judgment Engine trembled, its power spiraling out of control. Kale's body glowed with the same light as the core, his fury merging with the storm inside. Tell them. His voice echoed, deep and calm, even as fire engulfed him, that humanity is not soft. Tell them we endure. The explosion ripped through the sky, a sun blooming in the void. The Judgment Engine was erased in a single blinding flash. The colony shook, flames lighting the heavens. Yet when the fire cleared, the land still stood. Kale was gone, but the Empire's greatest weapon had been destroyed. Silence fell across the battlefield. The chosen fleets hesitated. For the first time in their history, they tasted fear not of defeat, but of belief. One human had stood against them, and though he had fallen, his legend had grown beyond their reach. Lyra stepped forward, carrying his memory. She raised her voice to both colonists and defected chosen. He showed us that fury is strength, and mercy is greater strength. The Empire told us humans were fragile, but Kale proved humanity is unbreakable. Across the stars, the message spread. The Chosen's rule began to fracture, their certainty undone. And though Kale's body was lost in the fire, his calm gaze and unyielding fury lived on in every whispered story. They had thought the human was gentle, but his fury had shaken the Chosen, and his mercy had changed the galaxy forever.